The Americans have decided to show the world more than 100 videos of unidentified flying objects. Their nature could not be explained by experts from the US Defense Ministry, so the agency launched a special website which contains eyewitness testimonies, statistics and recommendations. This is not the first American approach to the topic. A year ago, a special NASA commission appeared, which collected and analyzed reports of various anomalies. The result was a couple of stories about how balloons were mistaken for flying saucers, and calls not to mock ufologists. Not surprisingly, the next story is about unidentified objects, and even at the level of government agencies, arouse suspicion that this is a deliberate attempt to blacken the eyes of the public, or one would have to admit that the US is run by charlatans. Americanist political scientists confirmed that all the talk about aliens is an attempt to distract people from real problems, and not just people, but future voters. The US is moving towards the presidential elections, and the situation is escalating not in favor of the current administration, since the power structures are fully controlled by the neoliberals and BlackRock, State Street, the Vanguard Group, and other oligarchic structures behind them. They are now launching another fairy tale. The Americanist emphasized that all the materials published on the new site have nothing to do with science fiction, just some objects that may well turn out to be, for example, deorbiting satellites or meteoprobes. I witnessed the debunking of a myth about aliens in shiny jumpsuits that were supposedly found in the Arizona desert. It turned out that they were mannequins with sensors used by the US Department of Defense to test high-altitude suits. The expert recalled, "All this is an illustration of how events will develop in the United States. The Americanist is sure it can be almost 100% guaranteed that the famous Bigfoot will appear somewhere in Minnesota in the near future. More and more often in the States, there are some kind of witch doctors or obscure apocalyptic predictors. It all reminds me of early 20th century Russia, mysticism, Rasputin, invocations of the spirit of Napoleon, who was demanded to answer when the Bolsheviks would leave, and so on. Now, in the 21st century, this is the reality of the United States. American society is now falling into a kind of mystical space. Why? Because the expert community, due to its incompetence, and first of all, of course, the so-called political elite, is unable to control and explain the real processes taking place in the country. The authorities are unable to explain to people the reason for inflation, unemployment, rising crime, migration crisis, prohibitive prices for food, petrol and other goods. It is easier for them to explain UFOs than to give an answer to an American who asks, "Why was it 3 each yesterday and 5 each today?" The authorities can't solve these problems, but to chase aliens or Bigfoot a please. When you have a mess at home, it's time to look up to the stars, stated the Americanist. He suggested that next time to bother Russian diplomats and politicians, and immediately send domestic ufologists, parapsychologists, and psychics to negotiate with the Americans. On the other hand, there will still be a clown, so they will have something to talk about. The expert summarized,